Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson, and we are live on YouTube. Sam, happy Monday morning.
Thank you. We're back in the studio. We're not in Chris's office, which means I don't get to lay back on the comfy chair.
You have to sit up like a professional.
Right.
This
I
time.
don't like that.
That's all right. I don't know if the boss has heard us yet. We haven't gotten any
He
feedback
hasn't
from
reacted
him.
yet. Yeah.
He hasn't. So maybe I just assume that means we can do that anytime.
That
no
or
reaction.
he's plotting revenge.
Yeah.
One of those two things.
Or we're getting fired.
Yeah.
Friday afternoon. So we'll see what happens.
That would be a pretty swift and solid revenge.
It would. All right, this is your AFC East preview. We're going to preview the 2019 season, but before we go team by team, do we have to recap the Hall of Fame game?
We're going to have to mention it because otherwise people will be unhappy. One specific person I can think of will be unhappy. So let's
mention the Hall of Fame game.
Right. The Hall of Fame game, you know, it was off to a bad start when there were starters that you have to rack your brain to remember who the hell they are.
It's a glorified AAF game. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The rosters were so Hall of Fame preseason game that when you looked at NFL.com, they didn't know who half the players were. They were listed as null.
Yeah.
Like, that's how into the bottom of the barrel some of these rosters were going for the Hall of Fame game.
Not great.
We saw a few interesting players. We saw the debut of Drew Lock. Didn't go well. We saw Kurt Benkert had almost the entire game. Made some nice plays. Made some ugly, ugly plays.
That's what always fascinates me is, Benkert absolutely looked good for the majority of the game. The ball, he's got a good arm. He had a good arm in Virginia. Nothing changed there. Had some good zip, made a few nice throws, but he had two passes as bad as Locke's worst passes.
Right. We also saw
coverage.
Matt Schaub play, and basically at this point, if you're carrying Matt Schaub in the active roster, you're committing salary cap malpractice. He cannot play in the regular season. Cannot. Like, no way whatsoever. His arm is garbage. His decision-making is as bad as it's ever been. He is an utterly useless human being when it comes to playing football on Sundays. Now, you're saying, okay,
he's on punches here, huh?
He's on the roster because he's smart, he's a savvy veteran, he's got years of experience, he's great in the quarterback room, he's vital to their prep going into the week. Fine. Then hire him as a coach or a consultant. Get him off the salary cap and stop having him taking up a roster spot.
We saw
because
him
he's pointless.
In 2013, the last time he played extensive football, he looked like he had completely lost it.
Right.
That was when he had
how many
six
years
after
ago was
pick
that
six.
now?
About 6 years,
Right.
according to my math. So he's been sitting there as a backup since that time. But, yeah, his arm looks shot.
Right.
I don't care if he knows the offense.
He's
His
been
arm does
sitting
look
there
shot.
as a backup for the last 6 years, past the point where he was already done, just decomposing on the bench. And now we're just going to be like, well, it's probably fine. I don't see a problem if Matt Ryan goes down that we'll need to put out Matt Schaub.
I have a feeling Kurt Benkert might win that job.
I mean, honestly, that's evidence enough that there's no way you can carry that guy as your backup quarter. He should not be occupying a roster spot that could go to genuine people that could, provide function on Sundays. Like, whatever he's doing for that team.
Are you done?
His function is off the field. Therefore, hire him in an off-the-field capacity and move on. That's my summation of the Hall of Fame game. The end.
It was ugly offensively.
Yes.
And
Thanks
as
largely to Matt Schaub.
as our friends always tell us, take the under.
Yeah.
In preseason games. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the AFC East. We're going to go alphabetically, and just to be clear, we're going alphabetically by city. Some people were, questioning that. They said I went out of order with the alphabetical stuff.
Who was doing that?
I don't know. One of our YouTube friends. But he got corrected, rightfully corrected. So we're starting with the Buffalo Bills and what they did this offseason, what they're looking at.
Who are interestingly both alphabetically, both by city and by
I can't be wrong here.
Right.
We got both here. So the Buffalo Bills, what we did with the NFC East preview is we tried to give, a best-case scenario for each team, but also an objective view of what we're looking at. Let's start with the offense for the Bills. Year one of Josh Allen, and this is going to be the consistent theme because this is all second-year quarterbacks. Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, and Josh Rosen are all in the AFC East now. I think you could debate which one of those three had the worst supporting cast or situation in the NFL last year. There's a fair debate probably for each guy. I think Rosen probably wins, but Josh Allen did not have a good situation under center for the Bills last year. So this offseason, Made a ton of moves along the offensive line and a few big moves as far as receivers go. They bring in John Brown as a deep threat. They bring in Cole Beasley as a slot receiver. And then along the offensive line, drafting Cody Ford in the second round, bringing in a guy like Mitch Morse to play center. Ty Nsekhe, who we really liked as a, at least a swing tackle at worst. So they've made a bunch of moves to try to increase production offensively around Josh Allen. Dawson Knox also third round tight end. Do you think this offense can take a step forward?
Yeah, I think it can. I really like the moves they've made overall. Obviously, anytime you kind of improve that offensive line to get back to being average, you creep back toward average.
We like it.
Always a bonus. But I really like what they've done with the receivers they brought in, because obviously they haven't gone and found a superstar wide receiver, paid tons of money for it. They've brought in sort of lower level guys that have a really clearly defined skill set and can collectively up the level of receiver that Josh Allen is throwing to. Josh Allen went deep, like 20-plus yards down the field, more than any other quarterback in the NFL last season, one of the highest rates we've ever seen. When you've got an arm like that, I think you're pretty keen to just loose it down the field whenever you can. So they bring in a guy like John Brown, who we saw last year when he had an vaguely accurate quarterback in Joe Flacco, throwing him deep balls. He was a weapon. Well, then you got Lamar Jackson, and then, John Brown disappeared. So when he had Flacco there, John Brown looked like a dangerous deep threat still. So they're at least pairing Josh Allen with a guy that can definitely get open deep and hopefully maximize that propensity for targeting deep down the field. But then you bring in a guy like Cole Beasley, and intuitively you think, well, that's not a great match for a quarterback that is pretty inaccurate, isn't a high percentage passer underneath. It's like the thing we've railed against with Cam Newton for years. You can't try and fix this guy's accuracy by turning him into a short and underneath passer. That just doesn't work, because he's never going to be good at that. So you're just playing to the things that he's bad at, and that's a bad strategy. But
you need guys that can get open.
Yes, and that's the key, right, is that as long as you don't plan to try and transform Josh Allen into a short and underneath Tom Brady-esque passer, it's a good idea, because what you're doing is you're getting a guy in Cole Beasley whose skill set is getting open. His skill set is route running and sort of savvy and understanding coverage and being able to get separation, and nothing will improve the accuracy of your quarterback more than his receivers getting separation. And that's the point we've been making with Cam Newton in Carolina for years, is that if you're looking for players to help him be more accurate, the ones that get open and get greater separation will give him a bigger margin for error to work with. Right. And that's what you're talking about with Josh Allen, that, okay, he may throw the same quick out 2 yards behind his receiver still, but now his receiver has 2.5 yards of separation, so he can adjust to that and still make a catch. When his receiver was somebody else and he had a yard of separation, the same 2 yard behind him pass was now thrown at a cornerback. So that's the difference, that the level of separation basically magnifies the margin for error and the window that Josh Allen can hit on these underneath throws.
Yeah, using creep back toward average again, that's the way for Allen to essentially maximize his skill set or his potential. So I just wrote a piece that should be up on PFF.com shortly. It's essentially looking at the class of 2018, which, again, 3/5 of the first-rounders are sitting here in the AFC East, so we'll have plenty to discuss with all of them, and saying, okay, what went right in 2018 for these guys, and what do they need to improve upon? So with Josh Allen, the thing he certainly needs to improve upon is his accuracy. And, again, we always say you can't really do it. There's a low percentage chance that you can, but if you do have a guy that is throw-for-throw inaccurate, like a Josh Allen, like a Lamar Jackson, if you do get more open throws, it will help. The rookies were, when we look at our most inaccurate QBs, it's all of the rookies minus Baker, essentially from last year. So Josh Allen was number 4, highest percentage of uncatchable passes, so essentially passes that his receivers didn't have a shot to make a play on. 4th highest percentage of uncatchable passes between 1 and 20 yards. So we took out screens. We took out deep passes, which tend to fluctuate a little bit. He was 4th highest. Josh Rosen, we'll talk about him in a minute, had the highest percentage. Lamar Jackson, 2nd highest percentage. So 3 out of the worst 4 were all rookies. The thing about this number, this is in line with how Josh Allen played at Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
So to expect that to improve might be a little unrealistic but to your point, if you have more open throws, it doesn't matter if you hit him in stride as much. At least you're going to complete a slightly higher percentage of passes if you have guys that can get open, and that's better than missing a guy completely.
Right. So he may not end up being any more accurate, but you can increase the production off the back end by having a receiver that essentially increases the target area.
And here's the good part about Josh Allen. He showed the big playability that he had at Wyoming. He was 13th in the NFL in big-time throw percentage. That does coincide with the bad, though. He had the exact same turnover-worthy throw percentage, which was third worst in the league. So he's this highly volatile quarterback that will make special plays, make some bad decisions, and again, have some inaccuracy. But then his running ability, which we knew he was a good athlete at Wyoming, but I think he impressed everybody with his rushing ability. Fourth best rushing grade among quarterbacks in the NFL, and led all quarterbacks with 508 yards on scrambles.
Yeah, hurdled Anthony Barr. Like, he made some pretty spectacular plays on the ground.
So I think if you're looking for a best-case scenario, Bills fans, I would, as much as we looked at Josh Allen and said, look, he's not the caliber of prospect as Baker Mayfield or as Sam Darnold or even as Josh Rosen we didn't think coming out, I could see one of those years where Josh Allen, he had a bunch of rushing touchdowns last year, where he puts up 28 touchdowns, he rushes for another 8 or 9, and he's a pretty valuable piece because he's got this playmaking ability. But I do think it's going to be tough for him to get out of his inconsistent ways. I think he'll throw interceptions, and he's going to miss easy throws. But if you give him the opportunity to make plays down the field, I think there are certain seasons where I think Bills fans will be happy with Josh Allen and say, hey, look, he's a playmaker. And in any given week, he could put up a 4-touchdown game and pull an upset against, say, a New England Patriots team or whatever it might be. So that's, I think, your best-case scenario, Bills fans. Allen, the playmaker, maybe mitigates some of those negative plays.
Yeah, I think so. I think the offense overall, what they've done in the offseason is good. I think they've headed in the right direction. And then the single biggest thing for the defense is drafting Ed Oliver.
Yeah.
And that just strikes me as an exciting guy in the NFL because of the usage pattern in college. We know that he was played as a true nose tackle for a lot of the time. We talked in the pre-draft process about what happens when you sort of remove his pass rushing snaps lined up at nose tackle, directly over the center, and it improves dramatically.
He's much more in line with other players in the draft class.
Right, because you could see this. His run defense grade is always spectacular. His athleticism, his tape always showed this guy with sort of, I don't want to say Aaron Donald potential, but, would remind you of that kind of player. And yet the pass rushing production was never there, and we were always trying to figure out why. And that was a big part of it, is just how they used him there. So I'm hugely excited for how he can develop in the NFL now that you assume he'll be unleashed as the alignment kind of player that he should be.
The alignment's one thing. I do think there were certain technique issues, again, to compare him to Aaron Donald.
Right.
If Aaron Donald wasn't a freak athlete, he would still be productive because his hand usage and leverage and everything is spectacular. Oliver does need to learn better technique.
Right.
But
he's Aaron Donald without any of the refinement that Donald had coming out.
Right. I fully expect. Oliver had 3 straight years of 90-plus run defense grades. I expect him to be a productive player. I think the question will be how effective will he be rushing the passer? Will he turn that the raw skills into productive pass rushing ability? I think when you step back and look at this Bills defense, though, because now they did make the playoffs 2 years ago, but last year they weren't a great team. I think people forget how good this coverage unit has been.
Yeah.
Top 10 coverage unit. They were number 6 in 2017, number 9 last year by PFF grades. Sean McDermott has come in. He's the head coach, implemented a zone-heavy scheme. They play a lot of too-high safety stuff. I mean, they'll mix it up. They'll play a little bit of everything, like a lot of teams. But they've done a really, really good job of just making life difficult for opposing passing offenses, which is a great way to win in the NFL. That's why they've at least been in games, and that's why they made the playoffs in 2017 with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, and he wasn't even great that season. The offense wasn't great at all that season, but they played an ugly brand of football that stopped the pass and didn't really stop the run a whole lot. So it's kind of this modern day, make life difficult for passing offenses if you can. You've got a star back there in Tre'Davious White. You've gotten really good safety play from Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer back, the last couple of years. we'll see if they can take a step forward in the front seven. I think that'll be the big story for Buffalo.
I think their big question mark is at that number 2 corner spot, because you've got Tre'Davious White, who's been excellent. Levi Wallace last year looked really good in limited action.
About 300-something snaps.
Right.
Yeah.
He didn't play that much, but when he was on the field, he looked fantastic. And his story is great. You know, he was a guy that basically was he a walk-on at Alabama? Went from playing intramural flag football to starting for Alabama in the space of a couple of years.
Yeah, really
then ends
incredible.
up on the Buffalo Bills, you know, playing a few hundred snaps as a rookie, trying to force his way into being a starter from being like a rec player a couple of years ago. He's undersized, so I think he's a guy who, you know, with a year or two in an NFL weight room could add a little bit of physicality to his game, but even then it's not like it looks like a massive problem. Like you look at that and say, never going to be any good because you're that lightweight. But he only gave up like 94 yards last season over, you know, a few hundred snaps, 19 targets. I think he could be their second best cornerback. They bring in a guy like Kevin Johnson, who is interesting because we didn't like him coming out as a prospect. He had a really good rookie year, I think, and then stank for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
So his rookie year made us look wrong, and then every other year of his career made us look right. And he's this kind of unknown quantity, right? Which guy is he? Because if he's the second guy, then there's no reason Levi Wallace couldn't win that job.
Right. Yeah, it is one of those schemes too, because it is so zone heavy. If you don't have 2 stars, you can kind of hide them a little bit.
Right.
And you know, I think what the scheme does too is they communicate really well. They do a really good job of passing off routes and just not allowing a high percentage of open throws. So if they can continue that, and the offense does take a step forward, Josh Allen does take a step forward, I think Buffalo has the inside track to be the second best team in the AFC East. I think it's between them and the Jets. We'll talk about the Jets in a few minutes. But, you know, I could see that happening with the Bills.
Yeah.
Big year, I think, for Sean McDermott in his 3rd season.
I'm just really interested to see how this offense is going to come together with all the pieces that they've added to Josh Allen. And really to see if Josh Allen does develop or if he is just, you know, if he's sort of Jameis, which is the same guy all the time. And maybe one year things will come together and he'll be the MVP you think he'll be, but probably not ever. It's just going to be the same guy every year. So I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to work for the offense. Are we about to move on to the next team?
Yeah.
Because I want to jump in here before.
Yeah.
That's okay?
Go for it.
We are starting a new promotion on YouTube, which this is on, right? If you're listening to this just on your audio podcast platform of choice, this is not massively relevant to you. Having said that, you could go to YouTube and get in on the action as well. If you subscribe to the PFF YouTube channel, we're going to choose one winner each week to get an Edge, a PFF Edge, and a PFF Elite account for free.
I didn't know that.
So get in there if you're a new subscriber.
Wait. Why are we giving stuff away for free? It is the peak of our sales season.
It is.
We should try to make every last dollar. Why would we give something for free?
Because we appreciate our YouTube subscribers. And we want to give them a little love back.
All right. I
So
appreciate our YouTube
get in there.
subscribers.
PFF subscribers, we are going to give away Edge and Elite.
Pretty good deal.
Well, yeah,
They're
very
going,
good deal.
They're
I would
hot
think,
off.
right?
They're going quick.
All you need to do is click the subscribe button, and you could potentially win an Edge or Elite.
Feels easy enough, and then you can listen to us all the time on YouTube.
Exactly. Why
all
wouldn't you want
week
that?
long. All right, let's move on to the Miami Dolphins, and I think if we're objective about the Dolphins roster,
Yeah.
I think it's full rebuild mode. You've got Brian Flores coming over, first-year head coach, coming over from the New England Patriots as defensive. He was the defensive coordinator in New England. A fascinating storyline in Miami. Everybody, it's the preseason. It's training camp. Everybody's got to focus on this season. Josh Rosen versus Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm on record as saying I know what Ryan Fitzpatrick is. And if you are the Miami Dolphins, you're year one of your head coach, it's full rebuild mode, and you just have to figure out what you have in Josh Rosen. I know what I have in Ryan Fitzpatrick. And to the point where he played so well last year that he's due for just an absolute disaster. I mean, that is the story of Fitzpatrick's career.
Except he already had the disaster. That's why he got benched.
A little bit.
Like he had 2 games.
He didn't fall off
played
enough.
Phenomenally. And you're like, well, okay, when does he play badly enough so that Jameis has to come back in?
He still played he still had more drop because he played so well.
You know what was
early
fun?
in the season.
Ed Reed just got inducted into the Hall of Fame with A, the coolest looking bust in the Hall of Fame, and B, rocking a cigar and a hat along with his gold jacket at the ceremony.
They said he was smoking a cigar from like 7 a.m.
Right. Ed Reed remains one of the coolest human beings on the face of the planet. But while this was happening, we went through and wrote an article about Ed Reed because we've got a lot of his early career in the PFF archives. And Gordon McGuinness went back and wrote this article. And when you go through our sort of analysis comments, so we have this whole world of data, and then there's like a comment section where you add a little bit more context to what happened, articulate it. Now, over the years, this has evolved into a sort of shorthand of letters and symbols and numbers and all this kind of stuff that you can read and you understand what happened. Back in 2008, when we were first doing this,
that was full prose.
It was basically Ben Stockwell writing out an essay on every play that happened, right? So Gordon read me out one of these comments about Ed Reed that was this long description of the play and what happened, and he was using numbers. And using the numbers, I was able to work out exactly who was involved in the play. So it was a deep ball intended for Ocho Cinco. Ed Reed comes over and intercepts it. He goes, okay, now guess the quarterback. It's like, okay, well, it can't be Carson Palmer because that would be too obvious. Fitzpatrick.
Really?
So Fitzpatrick was back slinging YOLO balls for the Bengals back in 2008. Ed Reed picking him off from across the field. But he's still doing that, essentially, is my point.
That's great.
The guy has not changed in over a decade, just out there slinging deep. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it goes badly wrong.
Yeah, him and Jameis had the highest percentage, second and third highest percentages of turnover-worthy plays last year, but they were sitting there at the top of positively graded plays. Fitz and Jameis and that system in Tampa Bay was very similar. So, again, I think Miami's goal this year is to figure out, is Josh Rosen a franchise quarterback? And unfortunately for Josh Rosen, even if he is, Miami should still be in play for a QB next year. And then a best-case scenario, our colleague Mike Renner just wrote an article on ESPN comparing Tua and Trevor Lawrence and basically saying all the numbers point to Trevor Lawrence and the traits being by far the best quarterback in the NFL, in college football this year, a true sophomore. We've never seen a true freshman play like him and have the NFL arm and all the other stuff that he can do. So being bad in 2020 is probably going to be really beneficial to the team that has the number one overall pick. I think Miami and a couple other teams could be in that mode, 2-year tank mode, and completely turn the franchise around with a Trevor Lawrence.
Has anybody ever actually successfully achieved that, though?
Look, I'm not saying that you do it. I don't know how you implement. Even if I was GM right now of the Miami Dolphins, I don't know if I would have the ability to implement it, because how do you go tell these players, here's what we're doing?
How do you tell the owner? I mean, we're going to nobody has the patience for you to stink for 2 straight years intentionally.
I think it's an easy sell to an owner, a businessman, especially a team like the Miami Dolphins, who have not truly had a great quarterback since Dan Marino.
Right, it is right
they
up
had
until
Jay Fiedler, and they had a little Chad Pennington action and all that stuff. But if you told them, suck it up for 2 years and we'll get you the next Dan Marino, a smart owner is going to say, okay, I'll do it.
Right.
But if you go tell Laramie Tunsil and Christian Wilkins and Devontae Parker, hey, here's what our plan is, they're not going to buy into that.
But then you're like 8 games into utter futility and the fan base is losing its mind and you get itchy trigger finger and you fire everybody. That's the way this works. People may have even attempted to buy into this in the past, but nobody has the patience to let that play out for 2 years.
You just do it. You just have the patience. So here's the deal. Josh Rosen, you got to see what you have with him. Unfortunately for Rosen, we talked about him maybe having the worst situation in the NFL last year. This one might not be that much better than we had in Arizona. The offensive line, we ranked them 31, I believe, out of 32. Or
it might have been 32, I think.
It might have been 32. I mean, they were among the worst. Laramie Tunsil he's developed pretty well at left tackle, but a bunch of question marks beyond that. Jesse Davis, Kyle Fuller, Daniel Kilgore, Michael Dieter, is Deion Calhoun going to be in there? Jordan Mills, is okay. Who ends up starting? We'll see what happens with Miami, but the O-line's not great. The playmaker situation, Devontae Parker in his contract year, Kenny Stills, Bryce Butler, Albert Wilson, they're all there. Jakeem Grant, and then the running backs, Kalen Ballage and Kenyon Drake. It's not the best group of playmakers to help your quarterback.
Poor Josh Rosen. He's going to be – This is exactly what's gonna happen, right? You're gonna get Fitzpatrick's gonna start, obviously, because he's Fitzmagic.
I can't see him. Now, when he in the Tampa Bay situation was really good. Other than the offensive line, that playmaker situation was great and great for YOLO Ryan Fitzpatrick.
But he's used to various crappy situations, right? He's
True.
going to start. He's going to win the camp battle with Josh Rosen, if indeed there even is such a thing going on. He'll win it. He'll start the season. We'll get a typical Ryan Fitzpatrick opening of a season. We may get some spectacular games right off the bat. It may take him a while to get going, but there'll be a few in there. Then there will be a disaster, and somewhere along the line, let's say week 6, week 7, we're going to say, right, that's enough of that, in with Josh Rosen. And he's going to get thrown out there behind the league's worst offensive line with no discernible playmakers to throw to, and he's going to stink again, and we're going to come out at the end of year 2, and we're going to say, well, Josh Rosen was a disaster. What was that guy ever doing drafted in the first round behind basically a completely untenable situation in either of his first 2 teams, not to mention the fact that requires, 2 different offenses in 2 years. Like, the guy had no shot.
He had different offensive coordinators at UCLA every year.
Right. He has had no shot to be successful at the NFL level.
All that
Zero.
said, we can also criticize his rookie season. Situation was terrible. He had the second worst grade. You know who he beat? Remember who had the worst grade in the NFL among QBs?
Stafford.
Ryan Tannehill.
Damn it. Stafford had a terrible one as well.
Tannehill had 8 big-time throws, 19 turnover-worthy plays. But his stats weren't bad. He had 5 touchdowns on screens, and he had the Miami Miracle. His stats looked way better than he played. So Rosen had the second worst PFF grade. And then, again, I was trying to figure out, okay, where can he improve? Coming out of UCLA, we said intermediate thrower. He could throw the seam, the dig. He makes all these NFL-type throws. He was dead last in intermediate accuracy last year. And then I said, all right, well, that offensive line was a disaster. He was under pressure 40% of the time. What about clean pocket intermediate throws? That's his strength, second from the bottom. He was in, as much as we've criticized Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen for their accuracy, Rosen's accuracy last year, which was much better in college than those 2 guys, but last year it was at Lamar and Josh Allen level. It was really, really poor. So that is not a good sign for Rosen. And my big question for him coming out of UCLA, while he could do NFL things, never dominated like a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. Even, Josh Allen's best season in college was better than Rosen's best season. Rosen's body of work was better, but Josh Allen's peak season was better than anything we saw from Rosen as far as PFF grade goes in college.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that Rosen's best season was his freshman season, which wasn't spectacular. It was just really good for a freshman. And then he just never got any better from that point. Everyone was assuming that if you're that good as a freshman, how good are you going to be when you get to the NFL?
Very concerning.
The answer was the same level.
Very concerning. Let's go to the defensive side of the ball. Again, I don't think they're flowing in playmakers.
Hang on. Back to the offense for a second. What the hell are they doing with Kenyon Drake? Kenyon Drake has been the most talented running back on that roster for a couple of years now.
Maybe it's Drake.
And never gets given the starting gig.
Maybe it's him.
What?
Alabama didn't use him. Last coaching staff didn't use him.
What's the problem? Put him out there. He's a playmaker. He's the best playmaker you have. Give him the ball.
You just want to be right about you saying
I'm
him.
already right. I just want it to look good.
Derrick Henry was a
Derrick
monster.
Henry had like 1 run against the Jags last year.
He was a monster down the stretch. You
I'm
said
just
that
saying,
he was going to have a better career than Derrick Henry.
I didn't say that. I said he was the better running back.
Oh, okay.
Kenyon Drake is a phenomenal playmaker who, for some reason, multiple coaching staffs now are not giving the starting gig to. I kind of get that in theory, if you look at him, he's a little bit more of a – he doesn't have the heaviest frame in the world. If you're into that kind of thing, big bruising backs, you're going to go with a Frank Gore or a Kalen Ballage. But this is the NFL in 2019.
Oh, Drake
shouldn't be into
Drake
that.
Could be, that perfect space-type player, right?
Right.
Satellite player. All right, defensive side of the ball for Miami. Here's what will be very interesting. They weren't very good last year, but there are some decent players there. And then you've got the new scheme coming from Brian Flores. The Patriots play as much man coverage as any team in the league. We've seen Belichick disciples. Matt Patricia went to Detroit. They played top 3 man coverage as far as a percentage goes in the NFL. If the Dolphins do that, we'll get to see a guy like Xavier Howard play pure man the whole season. And, as great as he was last year as far as picking passes off and stuff, he still gives up a lot. So we've always said he's, on his best day, he looks like Richard Sherman. On his worst day, he looks like a bad Big 12 cornerback. I think we'll learn a little bit more about Xavier Howard. A lot of his spectacular plays came off coverage zone last year. Do the Dolphins try to make him into their Stephon Gilmore?
That's going to be really
taking
fun.
those big receivers away.
Because his interception total is going to go down to like 3. He's going to end up playing better, and we're going to be on the other side of it again.
Yeah, so instead of being in
Xavier
the
Howard
70s,
sucks now in this new system. We're going to be actually use better than he was a year ago.
And that's because man coverage corners generally don't have as many interception opportunities, but like Stephon Gilmore broke up more passes than any corner in the NFL. That's what man coverage guys do. They force incompletions more than picking passes
off. And the reason for that is because you're not looking at the ball. You know, when you're playing man coverage, you have your eyes on the receiver. Typically, at some point in the play, you end up turning your back on the quarterback. You don't see the ball coming until the last possible moment where you're focusing on essentially breaking it up rather than catching it yourself. Zone corners, their eyes are on the quarterback. They get to see the thing coming the whole way, and a lot of the time they're kind of breaking in front of the receiver as the ball arrives. It's just those guys are teed up to catch the interceptions. Man corners aren't. That's why Revis never had those monstrous interception totals.
Right. Dolphins were 30th in coverage grade each of the last 2 seasons. So the new scheme could help a little bit. I think all eyes are also going to be on Minkah Fitzpatrick, a guy that came out of Alabama as a slot/safety. He did a lot of nice things last year, except his tackling was just atrocious. He was the guy that was fundamentally sound and tackled well in college, and he missed over 10 tackles last year, even though he covered fairly well. So his year 2 development will be important. And I think, similar to past Patriots teams that Flores has had, the linebacker position doesn't have the most athleticism, but New England has found a way to get the most out of their linebackers. So guys like Raekwon McMillan, Kiko Alonso, Jerome Baker, can they, kind of hide that group a little bit in the scheme?
Kiko Alonso in space right now is depressing.
Since he got hurt, it's been rough.
Christian McCaffrey made him look horrendous out in space. Josh Allen turned him back. You know that clip that appears in every Barry Sanders highlight where he turns the Patriots defensive back inside and out like 3 times?
Yep.
Like without touching him, he makes the guy fall over and basically runs an S shape around him and then, scores a touchdown. Josh Allen did that to Kiko Alonso last year. That shouldn't happen. Aside from anything else, Josh Allen's quarterback, not Barry Sanders. And Kiko Alonso
80-plus rushing grade.
Look like that poor defensive back. That's just how completely unable to move he is these days.
And then when you look at the pass rushers,
what pass rushers?
They don't have anybody. Mm-hmm. This is why I do think they might be embracing just full-on tank mode. I mean, we're talking about Charles Harris in year 3. Can he develop? He hasn't gotten after the quarterback as like people expected. Christian Wilkins was the first overall pick. He's like Ed Oliver light, I would say, except a little bit older as far as good run defender. Can he get after the quarterback consistently? It's a bit of a question mark because only last year at Clemson did he really show on a snap-for-snap basis that he could do it. But he is, that classic, fantastic, fundamentally sound football player. So I think he'll be a fine fit there. I still probably would have liked more of a home run type of selection in the first round.
Well, yeah. Home run selections in the first round are typically preferred.
Home run opportunity. I don't know if Wilkins has a chance to be a home run. So there's just a lot of question marks on that defensive line. Devon Gotcha.
So
Akeem Spence is there. Jonathan Ledbetter.
Our last preview podcast, we were doing the NFC East, and we took a sledgehammer to the prospects of the New York Giants and basically gave them a pretty strong odds to get the number 1 overall pick.
We said top 10.
Yeah.
I think the Dolphins have as good a shot as anybody.
Right. So if the Giants are winning 3 games, which I think is what I ballparked them at, what are the Dolphins winning?
I think they're I don't know what the actual odds are, but I think they're very much in the running for the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
That's what their roster
They're winning
like
a couple of games.
I would not be surprised if a year from now the storyline is, man, there's the second team moving on from Josh Rosen. The Dolphins are all in on Tua, or they're all in on Justin Herbert. I could absolutely see that happening.
Remember last year?
We got to move on. We got to move on.
You remember last year when we were doing previews for the Thursday Night Football and we were basically predicting crazy stuff that seemed to happen every time we did it? Here's one for you. The Dolphins are going to end up going 2-14, and one of those wins is going to be against the Patriots.
Oh, yeah. I could see that.
Yeah.
Like week 2 in Miami.
Right.
New England always struggles.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Fitzpatrick connects on one of those
You've
crazy
got
YOLO
a
games.
former Belichick assistant knows how to slow him down. I could see that. So Miami starts off 1-1,
yeah,
and then loses like 12, 13 straight because they're playing week 2 in Miami.
Right.
So all right, let's throw that on the record.
Yeah. Put a check mark on that. We'll come back to.
All right, we got a hard out in 22 minutes.
Okay, let's go.
All right, New York Jets.
They're not alphabetically first, are they?
No, it's New England. Sorry.
Right.
All right, New England Patriots.
They are if you went by mascot, though.
See, now they're in my head.
Wait till we get to the
YouTubers.
NFC North where they're the same. You can't be wrong. The alphabetical city is the
They're all
same
the
as the
same.
alphabetical mascot.
All right, let's go to the New England Patriots.
Okay.
Clearly the odds-on favorite to win the AFC East. It always comes down to, okay, does Tom Brady still have it?
He got extended, so they must think he has more in the tank.
3-year extension. So he's signed through his 44-year-old season. He'll now be the 6th highest paid quarterback in the NFL this year. I don't know how much that matters. Again, we look at that stuff a lot, but it's not like that just changed their roster construction.
No.
I do think the most interesting storyline out of New England the last season or so, the last offseason, is just their affinity for big wide receivers and big targets. As much as we keep saying, look, separation is king and all that stuff, and if anybody showed that, it's the New England Patriots with shorter guys and shiftier guys, and all of a sudden it's N'Keal Harry and it's Dontrell Inman and Demaryius Thomas and, a couple tight ends that they brought in to try to replace Gronk. What are they trying to do offensively, and what do they do without that, best of all time tight end playing for them?
Yeah, I think N'Keal Harry ends up replacing Gronk, not by being Gronk, but by essentially pivoting what Gronk's role was into being a big slot. So if you think of a Marcus Colston in New Orleans years ago, where he was a slot receiver, but he was, 6'3", 200-plus pounds.
I just don't know if that's their game. I don't know if that's something that Brady wants, that even that offense wants.
Well, I don't know that either, but I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So I think N'Keal Harry will end up being that. I think he's not the same as Marcus Colston. Marcus Colston had the big body, but he was a much more linear kind of player. He didn't have the sort of run after the catch, shifty.
Yeah.
He wasn't a bubble screen guy that was also able to run those the posts from the slot. N'Keal Harry has that combination of being a good jump ball guy, but also being really dangerous with the ball in his hands. You can get him the ball with these short wide receiver screens that everybody runs now and still have him dangerous. So I think they're going to end up with this sort of 11 personnel style offense in terms of N'Keal Harry, Julian Edelman, one other receiver. Pick one. It doesn't really matter
Philip
at that
Dorsett,
point.
Maurice Harris, Jacoby Myers,
Right.
all in the mix.
You're going to have those guys on the field. You're going to have a running back out there. But what's interesting is whether they go kind of run heavy from that. Because I don't love those receiving weapons. All the guys they've brought in to replace Gronk, I just don't love any of them. Edelman is obviously vital to how that offense functions almost regardless of what they do. But they have a lot of talent in the backfield and guys that can catch the ball as well. I think you might end up with this offense that looks like it's going to be pass-heavy and then isn't. They'll run the ball out of these pass-heavy formations and take advantage of the fact that everybody's playing nickel defense where everybody weighs 250 pounds.
Right. Yeah, it will be fascinating to see because they ran a ton. They ran the fullback out there a ton last. I don't know that they're going to stop doing that with James Devlin either. So I think they do like to play right now with the tight end and a fullback. At tight end, they got Benjamin Watson, who will be the starter when he's back from his 4-game suspension. So that'll tell us a lot. I think those first 4 weeks up front, the offensive line is very much intact. The big question mark will be Isaiah Wynn, 2018 first rounder, projected to play left tackle. Though there are rumors that maybe they're going to trade for a Trent Williams. If Trent Williams does get traded for, I think we're talking about the best offensive line in the league because the other 4 starters, Joe Thuney, David Andrews, Shaq Mason, and Marcus Cannon, especially that interior, those guys are all top 10 caliber players at their position. Cannon has played top 10 right tackle before, and Trent Williams, again, top 3 left tackle in the NFL. So if that did happen, maybe you do see a little bit more run-heavy New England Patriots. I know that's the narrative that they ran their way to the Super Bowl down the stretch last year, and there was like 1 or 2 games where they did really rely on the run game, but in the playoffs, Brady was still throwing the ball 40 times per game.
Ultimately, it's the Patriots, so what they do generally is not going to be what they do every single game anyway.
Right.
Like, this is a team that will be multiple anyway.
And ultimately, that's what it is. You get a whole bunch of different skill sets, and then you just make it game plan oriented. I think the defense will be a huge story because, they won part of the reason why they won the Super Bowl is because they could cover so well in man coverage. They made life really difficult for opposing offenses, including Patrick Mahomes. If you look at Mahomes' season last year, all of his out of rhythm passes, the percentages were through the roof. His accuracy went down playing New England's tight man coverage in those 2 games. Even though Kansas City scored a ton of points, they were just making life difficult in a pass-happy NFL with Stephon Gilmore, the best corner in the NFL. Jason McCourty played well. We saw a really good play from J.C. Jackson down the stretch. They just have a lot of weapons in that secondary.
Yeah, they really do. We were talking about this the other day, that what makes the Patriots fascinating is, so everyone would like to be able to do everything on defense or on offense, I think. They would like the capacity, but everybody thinks that you need players that can do everything in order to make that happen, and there aren't that many of those guys around, right?
Right.
So everyone would love a linebacker that can play the run equally as well as cover on the back end, a Luke Kuechly, a Bobby Wagner, but there's only 2 of those guys, maybe 3 in the NFL, and everybody else thinks, well, that means we can't do this.
Right.
The Patriots say, well, I don't need one guy that can do everything. I just need somebody on the roster that can do everything. And that is what enables me to play everything that I want to. So the Patriots, more than anybody else, are perfectly prepared to change personnel entirely depending on the game plan.
Right.
And that's what makes them such a fascinating team to watch work, because in order for this to happen, you need to be on the same page as the guys giving you the personnel, essentially. And
then they have linebackers. I always like to say, people think, a 3-4 outside linebacker is a linebacker. We always say, no, that's an edge rusher, right? And very few linebackers just all of a sudden line up and rush the passer, like actually go beat offensive tackles one-on-one. But Dante Hightower, Kyle Van Noy, and Jamie Collins now, who's returned, are all guys who have played edge rusher either in college or at the NFL level. That brings some of the flexibility. So none of those guys, they bring special versatility. Those guys aren't Bobby Wagner or Luke Kuechly, but they allow the Patriots to morph into 3-4 fronts and even fronts and all these different things. Michael Bennett could play multiple gaps up front. Just a lot of players who could do multiple things pretty well, or just have that very specific skill set, like you're saying, like a Juwan Bentley, who could be a hammer in the run game.
It's just a fascinating difference between Belichick and the way everyone else thinks. Everyone else is focused on what guys can't do and the problems that poses. Belichick is focused on what guys can do and the possibilities that opens up, and just what you need to do in order to make sure that you're only using those guys with what they can do.
And they'll literally game plan differently every single week. So I think the secondary is going to be a huge strength. You have Patrick Chung there, who he covers tight ends. Do they take second-round corner Jawan Williams, who's just a monster? Do they, breed him in that next role, even though technically he's a corner? Devin McCourty's still smart back there. There's rumors about Deron Harmon, who's been a really solid, strong free safety for them, potentially getting cut. Obi Melifonwu, another former top pick that they're bringing in, freak athlete with size. Just a fascinating collection of players. I think the Patriots are going to release a lot of good players, is what we're saying. It's a deep roster, but I do think ultimately their success, and Josh Gordon could eventually come back offensively. Their success, I think, still comes down to the pass game. And if Brady still has it, can he still play at a top 5 level, and do those playmakers emerge? Because right now we have him as a bottom 5 unit of playmakers. Can Brady elevate them? I think that's what it's going to come down to. Not the run game, but that pass game again.
I know we're not supposed to care about running backs anymore either, but I think Damian Harris could end up being their primary running back.
Yeah, I know you like him.
I do.
I don't see a path for him over Sony Michel, the runner, or James White, the pass catcher.
He's so much better than Sony Michel, though.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't see that path.
That's so true.
So New England, the favorite in the AFC East, I think we all agree on that. And do you think they still have the firepower in that passing attack to keep up with Kansas City and the Chargers and the Steelers and these other teams that they'll be competing with in the AFC?
Yeah, I mean,
is this the year Brady loses it, is my question.
Well, honestly, that's a bigger question, is we keep talking about this wall. At some point, it is going to hit. It's just inevitable, right? Now, maybe when he's 47 years old, we've no idea because it hasn't hit yet, but at some point it will, and it's probably going to hit fast when it does because it just tends to. So that's a permanent question hanging over the Patriots as long as Brady is their quarterback. Is when does this happen?
Just to be objective about his season last year, 2015, 16, and 17, probably the best 3-year stretch of his career.
And the best we've ever seen, I would say.
Yeah, and the best we've ever seen. And last year, did he regress a little bit? Yes.
Right.
but he regressed probably into about 2014 range where he was still, again, a top
So
three
because he's
quarterback.
40-something years old, you say, is that the start of the end? But nobody could sustain a 3-year run or 4-year run at that level. It was inevitable he was coming down to earth at some point. So he hasn't come down any further than you would expect any human being to come down to from that level.
Right.
Because it was so off the charts. So that's a permanent question hanging over the Patriots. Then the other question is, what does this offense actually look like now they've got no Gronk and they need to, again, reinvent themselves, evolve once more into something else that they haven't been in the past.
Will be a great storyline.
And that is fascinating. And then the third question, I think, is I don't know that they need to keep up with those teams if they run this different style of offense and if they become more of if they zig when everyone else zags again and become a sort of ball control offense from this 11 personnel group.
Yeah. The analytics guys wouldn't like that, though.
Well,
it's a riskier way.
Part of me hopes it works just because of that.
Yeah, just to screw over our own guys,
right.
our own numbers. All right, let's finish up with the New York Jets. Again, I think the Jets are competing with the Bills for the second place in the AFC East. I had some Jets fans, one guy in particular, just saying, hey, look, you said that the Bills improved more than the Jets this season. And I don't remember saying it, but I would say as far as putting stuff around Josh Allen, I'd say that the Bills did a little bit more than the Jets have done. But I would also say I have more faith in Sam Darnold's year 2 development than I do Josh Allen's. So if the Jets have a better season than the Bills, I think it has more to do with Darnold, developing and getting back to what a lot of the stuff that we saw at USC. The fact that he was our top graded quarterback over the last 4 weeks of the season was very encouraging. And, I think that's more important than, say, adding Le'Veon Bell. I do like the moves that they made on the offensive line as far as Kelechi Osemele for almost nothing. And since I made that apparent statement, they did add Ryan Khalil, out of retirement at center, even though he hasn't been great these last couple of years. Mm-hmm. It's still that's an upgrade over probably one of the worst center situations outside of the Bengals the last couple of years.
Oh, the last few years, their center situation has been a disaster. The question is it an upgrade over Jonathan Harrison, who was scheduled to start? And the answer is probably. But the upgrade that it will be is the way John Sullivan was an upgrade for the Rams, which is primarily upstairs in the head department.
And exactly.
Like he wasn't actually a great player anymore, but he was smart. He knew what he was doing. He could organize the offensive line. He could make line calls, et cetera, et cetera. Like that's the important thing that Ryan Khalil, we know, will be good at. Whether he's actually capable of playing that well anymore is far more debatable.
Now, as far as the rest of the Jets offense, Robbie Anderson has showed he can make plays, 10-plus yards down the field. Jamison Crowder, when healthy, he's battled a lot of injuries. Pretty solid slot, but I still think we're looking at this group of playmakers, and then question marks at tight end with Chris Herndon. He's out for 4 games, suspended. I know he's the starter, Sam. This Jets group of playmakers, even with Le'Veon Bell in there, that's a bottom 5 group still. Whereas if you're comparing to the Bills, maybe the Bills moved up just a touch. I can't remember where we put them as far as receiver rankings go, but I still have a lot of question marks about this Jets group.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell should be interesting because he's the perfect he's like, honestly, he is the argument about running backs right now. It's Le'Veon Bell because he does everything that you want a modern running back to be able to do, and he does it all to an elite level. And he's potentially able to elevate an offensive line as well because of his running style. He's a phenomenal receiver to the point where you can line him up as a wideout and have him run routes there and have him be effective. Like, he is talent-wise a phenomenal back, but every time we've seen him go missing for the Steelers, they've been able to plug in somebody else and not drop off at all.
Right.
So he's right now, he is the embodiment of the argument about whether running backs matter or not. So on paper, it looks like a fantastic upgrade because he's arguably as good as anybody in the league. He can do everything they want him to, and yet it probably comes down to the fact that if that offensive line isn't dramatically better and the quarterback isn't dramatically better, it doesn't matter.
And we mentioned this in the Zeke argument too. When you have that bell cow running back and you feel the need to justify it, if Le'Veon Bell catches 90 passes and it's a whole bunch of screens and checkdowns and stuff like that, that's not necessarily valuable. Now, if he is used a little bit the way he was in Pittsburgh, you split him out wide, you run some receiver-type routes with him, mismatches on linebackers, that is extremely valuable. Feeding him 100 targets just because you're paying him a lot of money isn't great. But using him as a true mismatch component, and then you do have a Chris Herndon who can stretch the seam, and you have a Crowder who can run out of the routes out of the slot, and Robbie Anderson. You have these different skill sets that could all come together and make for a pretty good offense. So the components could be there, but on paper you just don't have this track record of success with 4 or 5 playmakers like some other teams do. Sam Darnold's development, again, I wrote the article on 2018 draft class, what went right, what needs to improve. Darnold last year, as I said, he went from the first 9 weeks of the season, he had the lowest grade in the NFL, 50.9, gets banged up, comes back the last 4 games of the season, 87.7. That was number 1 during that time. He cut down his turnover-worthy plays from 18 over those first 9 weeks of the season down to only 2 over the last 4 weeks of the season. Now, we don't want to get caught up in, 4-game sample and project it forward to the season.
I think I can hear George from the other room screaming into his hands at the sample size issues.
I'm just trying to describe.
Right.
I'm just trying to describe what happened. The ironic thing about this is what we said out of USC. There was a 3-game stretch where he was maybe the worst quarterback in all of college football his last year at USC. But in all other games, he was number 3. So is this part of Darnold's DNA of, really volatile play? Or is it just a coincidence that he just happens to have these, good and bad stretches? I think that'll be a big story. The concerning part where he needs to improve, something he was really good at USC, was throwing the ball up to 20 yards. Short area accuracy, intermediate accuracy, and last year, 8th highest percentage of uncatchable passes in that range.
Can I say how excited I am at the prospect of this defensive line?
Yes, you can.
Leonard Williams, Quinnen Williams, Henry Anderson, and Nathan Shepard is sitting on that depth chart as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those teams that's creating a bit of an old school, guys that can just stop the run. Not saying that they can't get after the quarterback a little bit too. I think Quinnen can do everything. I think Henry can do a little bit of that. But it's kind of like a Steelers-ish defensive line, isn't it? Where it's, a bunch of big bodies, 3-4 defensive end type of bodies who can stop the run and get after the quarterback a little bit. The 15-year question in New York, though, or the question since John Abraham, is who rushes off the edge.
Yeah, still nobody.
Ja'Kai Polite, maybe third-round pick. Maybe they help. But right now we're talking about Brandon Copeland and Jordan Jenkins as your starting outside backers if we're talking a edge rush situation here. But my bigger question is the secondary. You've got Greg Williams coming in, an aggressive, man-heavy type of scheme, and I don't trust those corners.
Well, the funny thing is their second-string corners are better than the first-string corners, which is always
I don't know.
fun.
So I don't know if those guys are better than Tremaine Johnson. Perry Nickerson. You're talking Perry Nickerson, Darryl Roberts,
and Perry Nickerson are
they're not better
the
than
top 2 corners.
They're not better than Tremaine Johnson, but Tremaine Johnson's not worth what they're paying him.
Well, that's true.
He's not. So that's the bigger issue. Tremaine Johnson in a vacuum, I think, is their best corner, but he's not. What is he? Up to $15 million or whatever it is. He's not worth all that money. Brian Poole, pretty good. Okay, slot player. There's just so many question marks at such a crucial position. So again, best case scenario for the Jets. Offensively, you see Darnold's development, but defensively, Tremaine lives up to his hype and his money. A Perry Nickerson or a Darryl Roberts, plays out of their mind. Jamal Adams continues his high-end play. He was spectacular last year. C.J. Mosley, one of their big signings in the middle, more of a run stopper. He's a good, not great linebacker, again, for a lot of money. So they've made some upgrades defensively, just, kind of like the Giants, right? Like not necessarily at the most valuable positions.
Yeah, and the Greg Williams system is kind of fascinating because it's very clearly defined what's going to happen. You're going to have one of those safeties, presumably Marcus May, lined up 127 yards away from the line of scrimmage.
Yes, really, really far back.
He's going to stop the deep ball, and in so doing, he's going to open up all of the 15-yard digs.
Yeah,
because that's what happens.
And the short pass game in general, the type of stuff that the NFL's feeding off of right now, the team that you're trying to overtake, the New England Patriots, feeds off the short intermediate pass game. So.
And it kind of neutralizes that guy. So Marcus May is going to be anonymous this year just by being that deep safety. Jamal Adams is going to have to function completely in the box because that's what happens now. His big selling point over the past couple of years was this incredible versatility and lining up all over the field. And, doing everything. That's probably going to become a lot more one-dimensional now, and I'm sure he'll still be good at it, but it's probably not maximizing his talent.
Right.
And then you're putting those corners on an island and saying, hold up in man coverage, and don't worry, there's a safety 40 yards downfield to pick up the pieces if you make a mess of it.
Does Greg Williams adjust a little bit?
No.
Doesn't seem like a guy that adjusts a whole lot.
No. You put your balls in the C gap, and you play football, Steve.
Testicles in the C gap.
Yeah.
That was the
Testicles
that's the
in
rule.
the C gap.
The guy that's putting his testicles in the C gap, probably Jordan Jenkins. Going to do a lot of that. Brandon Copeland's going to be
CJ Mosley's definitely throwing his testicles into the C gap.
He's more of a B gap
against the run
guy.
Maybe.
He's a B gap player, A and B gap. So Jets, again, I think they're competing with the Bills for second place.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, yeah, the big question marks are what does the defense look like? He's an aggressive defensive coordinator, Greg Williams, so he'll tend.
So good things can happen.
Oh, a lot of good things do happen. It's just a case of what does the end result end up with in terms of balance, right? Are the good things enough to offset the bad things that come along with them?
Right.
And where does that elevate or move this unit to? And then the offense, it's all about Darnold, right?
Yeah, and I could easily see Darnold. We had him as our number 2 quarterback behind Baker. I could easily see that step happening this season. So there you have it. It's your AFC East preview. We're going division by division. Of course, let us know in the comments. Who do you want us to hit next? We're going to be back Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Either here or the boss's office discussing the next division. Of course, get to PFF.com. It is PFF Elite season, Sam. It's time to go get your Elite. Just dominate fantasy football. Premium stats, all the stats from the Hall of Fame game and all the preseason games are coming in.
Right. And they're not listed. The players aren't listed as null because we know who they are.
We have real players.
Right.
We have grades on every single snap in the preseason. It's all part of your PFF Elite package.
And a reminder, go to the YouTube channel if you're not there already. Hit subscribe, and you can win a free PFF Elite or Edge. A year's worth of access for free.
Why are you giving
just
this away?
By clicking the subscribe button.
Elite is a $200 value. You're just going to give it away.
I am.
All right.
Not just this time, but I want to do it every week.
Every week.
Every week.
I feel like we're going to lose money in this deal. All right, guys. You heard them. Subscribe to YouTube. Get yourself a free Edge or Elite. Maybe. We'll see you guys on Thursday. We got a meeting. We got to go.
Hard out.